She said I couldn't live without her. My new life on a private island says otherwise. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The waves crashed against the shore, a steady rhythm I'd come to know intimately. It wasn't the sound of her voice nagging or the creak of the floorboards as she paced. It was just the ocean. Pure, unadulterated freedom. I stood on the white sand, the sun warm on my skin, a cold drink in my hand. Paradise, right? No bills, no arguments, no expectations. Just me, the coconuts, and the endless blue. Sarah would have hated it. She was a city girl. Always needed the buzz, the noise, the feeling of being connected to something bigger. Me? I just needed to be disconnected. It had been 3 months. 3 months since I packed a single duffel bag, left a note on the kitchen counter, and vanished. The note was short. I'm gone. Don't look for me. I need to live. Immature, I know. But after 15 years, you run out of things to say. Or maybe you just run out of the will to say them. The last conversation was etched into my brain like a bad tattoo. We were in the kitchen. Same old fight about something stupid. The car insurance, I think. Or maybe it was about me not putting my socks in the hamper. The details blur. But her words, they were crystal clear. You are nothing without me, Alex. You wouldn't last a week. You couldn't live without me. She said it with a sneer, her eyes narrowed. That was her power move. To make me feel small, dependent. For years I let her, but that day something snapped. A wire in my brain short-circuited. I looked at her, really looked, and all I saw was a stranger, a warden in my own life. The love, if it had ever been there, was long gone, replaced by a bitter residue of resentment. So I nodded. Just nodded and walked away. Not out the door, not then. But I walked away from her. The plan began to form, a desperate, wild plan, a private island, the ultimate escape. I had money, not millions, but enough. From a crazy stock market gamble years ago that Sarah had scoffed at. Typical Alex, throwing money away. It turns out that money was my ticket. I spent weeks, months even, secretly researching, talking to brokers, making arrangements. A small, uninhabited island in the South Pacific. Remote, self-sustaining, my own little kingdom. The journey here was a blur of flights, a bumpy boat ride, and then finally this. The silence was deafening at first. After years of constant chatter, the hum of the city, the endless stream of Sarah's complaints, it was jarring. But then it became a deep, profound quiet that began to heal something inside me. Or so I thought. I remember the first night. The stars here are something else. Like someone spilled 1,000,000 diamonds across black velvet. I lay on the sand, not caring about the sand fleas or the humidity, and I looked up. I felt a wave of triumph wash over me. I did it. I actually did it. I lived. Without her. I pictured her face, twisted in disbelief, maybe even a little fear, and I smiled. It was a cold smile, I admit, but it was mine. I thought about all the times she'd belittled my dreams. My crazy ideas, as she called them, my desire for simplicity, for quiet. She always wanted more, bigger, better. A bigger house, a fancier car, a more important social circle. I just wanted to be left alone, and now I was, completely alone. The island itself was beautiful, a perfect cliché of tropical paradise. Palm trees, clear turquoise water, a small sheltered lagoon. There was even a tiny freshwater spring, enough for drinking and basic needs. I had brought tools, supplies, solar panels, and a satellite phone just in case. But I hadn't used the phone. Not once. I had cut off all ties. My old life was gone, erased. Sometimes a flicker of doubt would pierce through the euphoria. What was she doing? Was she okay? Did she even care? I pushed those thoughts away. She had made her bed. She had called me useless, unable to survive. I was proving her wrong. Every day on this island was a giant middle finger to her words. The days settled into a routine. Wake with the sun, fish for breakfast, swim, explore, build, read. I was learning to live off the land, to repair things, to be self-sufficient in ways I never imagined. Back in our suburban house, I was always the one who relied on her for everything. She managed the finances, the groceries, the social calendar. I just went to work, came home, and tried to disappear into a book or a movie. She called me a ghost, a shadow, and maybe I was. Maybe that's why this felt so real, so solid. Because here there was no one to cast a shadow over me, no one to define me. I was just Alex, the guy who lived on an island, the guy who proved he could live without her, the guy who, for the first time in a long time, felt a strange, unsettling sense of peace. But that peace was fragile. I knew it deep down. It was built on the foundation of what I had run from. And running, no matter how far, rarely truly makes you free. The sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. I watched it, sip my drink. The sound of the waves seemed to grow louder as dusk deepened. I closed my eyes, and for a split second, I heard it. Her voice, not words, just a low hum, a familiar cadence. I shook my head, clearing it. Just the wind, just the sound of my own thoughts playing tricks on me. This was my life now, and it was good. It had to be good. I had nowhere else to go. The first few weeks were a blur of adrenaline and activity. I built a simple shelter from palm fronds and driftwood, more like a lean-to at first, then slowly, painstakingly, a more sturdy hut. My hands, once soft from office work, became calloused and strong. I learned to identify edible plants, to fish with a spear I'd carved myself. Every small success felt like a monumental victory. Every sunrise felt like a fresh start. I had brought a few books, mostly survival guides and adventure novels. It felt fitting. My own adventure. I spent hours reading, the words blurring into the background as my mind replayed scenarios. What if she had come looking? What if she had tried to contact my family? I'd warned my brother, the only one I trusted, not to tell anyone where I was going. He just looked at me, his eyes full of concern, and said, "You sure about this, Alex? This is extreme." I just nodded. "I am sure," I'd said. "I need to breathe." Breathing, that's what it felt like here. Lung-filling breaths that didn't feel heavy with unspoken words or the weight of someone else's expectations. I swam for hours, letting the cool ocean water wash over me. The silence was addictive. No traffic, no sirens, no constant ping of notifications. My satellite phone remained off, tucked away in a waterproof bag. It was my emergency button, but I swore I'd never press it unless my life truly depended on it. And even then, I wasn't sure. I'd catch myself smiling sometimes, a genuine, unforced smile. Something I hadn't done in years. The memory of Sarah's words, "You couldn't live without me," would float into my mind, and I'd actually chuckle. "Look at me now," I'd whisper to the ocean. "I am thriving." But sometimes, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, a different feeling would creep in. It was a subtle shift at first. The vastness of the ocean, once exhilarating, would become isolating. The silence, once comforting, would become deafening. It was then, in the quietest moments, that a different kind of memory would surface. Not the arguments, not the sneers, but fleeting glimpses of something softer. Sarah, laughing at a bad joke I made. Sarah, her hand in mine as we walked through a park in autumn. Sarah, asleep beside me, her breath soft and even. I'd shake my head, trying to dislodge them. These were traps, sentimental illusions. She wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe she never was. Maybe I just imagined her to be. One evening, while trying to start a fire with damp wood, I felt a surge of frustration. It was the kind of frustration that used to make me snap at Sarah, blame her for something, anything. But here, there was no one to blame, no one to yell at, just me and the stubborn wood. I threw the piece down, yelling at myself. "Come on, Alex, you can do this." My voice echoed slightly in the stillness. And then, an echo of a different kind. Her voice, clear as day, cutting through the silence. "Just light it, Alex. Why do you always make things so hard?" I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't a real voice. It couldn't be. I spun around, scanning the empty beach, the dense jungle behind me. Nothing. Just the rustle of the palm fronds and the gentle breeze. My mind was playing tricks. Of course it was. Isolation does that to you, I told myself. You start to hear things. You start to see things. I forced myself to calm down, took a deep breath. It was just a memory. A powerful one, yes, but just a memory. I picked up the wood again, slowly, deliberately, and tried another approach. Eventually, the tiny flame flickered to life. I watched it grow, mesmerizing, comforting. But the unsettling feeling lingered. The island was vast, empty. And yet I felt like I wasn't entirely alone. It was just my mind, of course. My subconscious dredging up the past. But it was a chilling thought nonetheless. The silence wasn't as empty as I thought. It was filled with echoes. The echoes started to become more frequent, more insistent. It wasn't just her voice anymore. It was her laugh, her sigh, even the way she used to hum off key when she was happy. They were like snippets of old recordings, playing in my head at random, unwanted moments. I'd be fishing, pulling in a fat snapper, and I'd hear her say, "Alex, don't you dare bring that stinking thing inside." I'd be collecting coconuts, and I'd hear, "Careful, clumsy, don't drop it on your head." These weren't memories I was consciously trying to recall. They just invaded my thoughts, uninvited. The perfect solitude I had craved was slowly being invaded by the very person I had run from. It was unnerving. I tried to focus, to distract myself. I worked harder, longer hours, building the more elaborate shelter, clearing paths through the jungle, even attempting to cultivate a small patch of land for vegetables. Anything to keep my mind busy. But the harder I tried to push her out, the more she seemed to press it. Night, I would lie in my hut, listening to the waves, and I'd swear I could feel the indentation of her head on the pillow beside. The faint scent of her shampoo would drift through the air, even though I knew it was impossible. My sleep became restless. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, convinced I'd heard her whisper my name. One morning, I found a small, smooth stone on the beach. It was perfectly oval, fitting comfortably in my palm. For some reason, it reminded me of the worry stones Sarah used to carry. She had a collection of them, polished and smooth, each one imbued with some specific memory or meaning she described to it. This thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. I threw the stone back into the ocean as if it were a curse. I started talking to myself more, out loud. Sometimes I'd argue with her, even though she wasn't there. "No, Sarah, I am not being lazy. This takes time." Or, "For once, just let me do it my way." It felt insane. I was alone on an island, yelling at a ghost of my own making. Was this what she meant? That I couldn't live without her? Was her absence creating a void so profound that my mind was filling it with her presence? Even the parts I hated, the initial triumph I'd felt had faded, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. The island, once my sanctuary, began to feel like a very elaborate, very beautiful prison. Palm trees started to look like bars, the endless ocean like an insurmountable wall. I was trapped, not by physical restraints, but by my own mind, and she was the warden, even in death. Or was she? The line between reality and hallucination was blurring. I stopped eating as much. My clothes, which had fit snugly when I arrived, now hung loosely on my frame. My face, reflected in the small cracked mirror I'd brought, looked gaunt, eyes shadowed. I was losing weight, and more importantly, I was losing my mind. The paradise was crumbling around me, revealing the stark, terrifying truth beneath. One afternoon, a torrential downpour hit the island. I huddled in my hut, listening to the drumming rain, the wind whipping through the trees. It was the kind of storm that made you feel small, insignificant. And then, as if on cue, I heard her voice louder, clearer than ever before. "Alex, are you okay? Are you safe?" It was different this time. Not accusatory, not condescending. It was full of concern. I covered my ears, shaking my head violently. "Stop it," I whispered. "Just stop it. You are not real." "But," the voice persisted. And this time, it was accompanied by a flash of an image in my mind. Sarah, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for me. It was a memory I hadn't touched in years, the day I'd had a terrible car accident years ago. She had rushed to the hospital, her face stained with tears, holding my hand, whispering, "Please be okay, Alex, please." That memory, so starkly different from the recent ones of her, shattered something inside me. It was a reminder of a time when there was genuine love, genuine concern. And it made me wonder, had I misremembered everything? Had I twisted her words, her actions, to fit a narrative that justified my escape? The island, the escape, my triumph, all of it suddenly felt hollow and utterly terrifyingly wrong. The storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest brewing inside my head. The peace I thought I'd found was a lie. This wasn't freedom. This was a slow, agonizing descent into madness. And it was all because of her. Or rather, because of my inability to truly escape her even in this remote corner of the world. Days bled into weeks. My mental state deteriorated further. I rarely slept, haunted by images and sounds. I started talking to Sarah directly, as if she was sitting across from me. I'd argue with her, plead with her, even apologize. "I am sorry, Sarah. I am so sorry." The words were hollow, echoing only in the vast emptiness of the island. My hut became a mess. I barely cooked, living off dried supplies I had brought. I stopped caring about my appearance. My beard grew long and unkempt. My hair matted. I was a wild man, lost in his own despair. One afternoon, desperate for distraction, I started rummaging through the last of my unopened boxes. These were the ones I'd packed in a hurry, just throwing things in without much thought. Old clothes, some tools, a few random mementos. At the bottom of one box, beneath a pile of dusty shirts, my fingers brushed against something soft, familiar. It was a small velvet-covered diary, Sarah's diary. My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen this in years. She was fiercely private about it. I remembered once, early in our marriage, I'd jokingly tried to peek at it, and she'd snatched it away, her face tight with anger. "Don't you ever," she'd said, "read my private thoughts." I had respected that until now. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was lighter than I remembered, thinner. It looked like many pages had been torn out, Or perhaps it was simply an older one. My heart pounded. Should I open it? This was her private world. But I was desperate for answers, for anything that would explain the torment I was experiencing. I opened the cover. The first few pages were filled with neat, looping cursive, dating back years. Mundane entries about her day, her thoughts on work, a movie we'd seen. I flipped through them quickly, my eyes scanning for anything relevant. And then, I found it. A section toward the back, dated just a few weeks before I left. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible in places. August 12th, another bad day. The fatigue is crushing. Dr. Evans was gentle, but the news is always the same. Stage 4. It's spreading faster than they thought. How do I tell Alex? How do I burden him with this? He's already so distant. My breath hitched. Stage 4. What was she talking about? My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. It couldn't be. This was impossible. I read on, my eyes blurring with a mixture of fear and dread. August 15th. The pain is getting worse. I try to hide it, but I know he sees. He just withdraws further. He thinks I am nagging him, that I am trying to control him. But I don't want to be alone. I don't want to go through this alone. August 19th. We had another fight today. About the car insurance. So stupid. But I was so tired, so angry I told him he couldn't live without me. God, what a horrible thing to say. But it just slipped out. I was so afraid. Afraid he'd leave once he knew. Afraid he wouldn't be strong enough to watch me die. The words hit me like a physical blow. The diary slipped from my numb fingers, falling to the sandy floor of the hut. You couldn't live without me. It wasn't a taunt. It wasn't a sneer. It was a desperate, twisted plea. She was dying. And I had abandoned her. The full weight of my actions crashed down on me. The arguments, her mood swings, her distance. It all made sense now. It wasn't a manipulative wife. It was a woman facing her own mortality, trying to cope, trying to find a way to tell me. Or maybe, trying to push me away to spare me the pain. I remembered the last time I saw her. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. I had dismissed it as anger, as exhaustion from our constant battles. But it was fear. It was sickness. And I had been too blind, too selfish, too consumed by my own imagined misery to see it. I picked up the diary again, flipping to the last entry. It was dated the day before I left, September 1st. And I can't bear the thought of him seeing me like that. I can't bear the thought of him hating me for it. So, I'll let him go. Even though a part of me believes he won't be able to live without me. Not really, not truly. He thinks he needs to escape me. But what he really needs is to escape himself. I just hope he finds peace. Wherever he goes, I love you, Alex. Even if you don't believe it anymore. A sob tore from my throat. A guttural, raw sound that was swallowed by the emptiness of the island. She knew. She knew I was leaving. And she let me go. She sacrificed her last moments, her last wish for companionship, to spare me the pain of watching her die. And I, the coward, had embraced my freedom, celebrating my escape from what I thought was a toxic relationship, when in reality, I was escaping a dying woman's final days. The island, my paradise, my triumph, was now a monument to my profound selfishness. Every wave that crashed on the shore seemed to whisper her name. Every breeze carried the scent of her phantom perfume. She wasn't haunting me. My guilt was. My unforgivable, crushing guilt. Sarah was right. I couldn't live without her. Because living without her, knowing what I now knew, was a far more agonizing existence than anything she could have inflicted upon me. I dropped to my knees, the diary clutched to my chest, and let the grief wash over me. It was a tsunami, powerful and overwhelming, wiping away every ounce of triumph, every shred of peace I thought I had found. I was truly, irrevocably alone, and it was exactly what I deserved. The revelation from Sarah's diary didn't just hit me. It annihilated me. I lay there on the floor of my hut, the sand cool beneath my cheek for what felt like hours. The sun rose and set without me noticing. My world had imploded, shrinking to the size of a single, agonizing truth. I had abandoned the woman who loved me, the woman who was dying, under the cruel delusion that I was escaping a tyrant. When I finally managed to pull myself up, my body ached as if I'd been beaten. The physical pain was nothing compared to the hollowness in my chest. Every memory of her, once twisted by my resentment, now replayed with a devastating clarity. Her nagging was concern for my well-being. Her control was her trying to hold on to something stable as her own body betrayed her. Her "you couldn't live without me" wasn't a jab. It was a desperate confession of her own fear, her own love, and her heartbreaking willingness to let me go if it meant I wouldn't suffer. I picked up the diary again, devouring every word, searching for any other clue, any other sign I had missed. There were entries about doctor's appointments, about her pain getting worse, about the fear of the future. She had written about trying to pretend, trying to act normal, trying to protect me. And I, in my self-absorbed misery, had seen none of it. I hated myself profoundly. Every decision I had made, every step I had taken to reach this paradise, was built on a foundation of lies and a monumental failure of empathy. I had escaped to this island to prove her wrong, to prove I could survive without her. And now I realized she was right. I couldn't. Not like this. The island, once my sanctuary, was now my prison. The vast ocean, once a symbol of freedom, was now an impenetrable barrier. I was trapped, not by physical walls, but by the crushing weight of my guilt. There was no escape from this. No amount of swimming or fishing or building could erase what I had done. I tried to use the satellite phone. My hands fumbled with the buttons, desperate to connect, to find out what had happened to her. But I had cut myself off so completely, the SIM card might be inactive, the battery might be dead. And even if I got through, what would I say? "Hello. I just discovered my wife was dying when I abandoned her. What happened?" The thought was ludicrous. The shame was suffocating. I imagined her final days, alone, or worse, surrounded by people who loved her, while I was miles away, congratulating myself on my escape. The image tore at me. She had loved me, despite my flaws. Despite my distance, she had loved me. And I had repaid that love with abandonment. I wandered the beach aimlessly, the diary clutched in my hand. The beauty of the island seemed grotesque now, a cruel mockery of my former joy. The vibrant colors of the coral, the gentle sway of the palm trees, the clear blue sky, they all seemed to mock my inner turmoil. I found a smooth, flat rock near the water's edge. I sat down, tracing the lines on the diary cover. What could I do? There was nothing. I couldn't go back, she was gone. And even if she wasn't, how could I face her? How could I ever look her in the eye and explain the depth of my blindness, my selfishness? A memory flashed through my mind. Sarah sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a faint tremor in her hands. She had been enduring agonizing pain, and I had dismissed it, had even resented her for it. The sheer scale of my ignorance was staggering. I remembered the day I packed my bag. She was in the other room, quiet. Too quiet. I had assumed she was giving me the silent treatment, her usual passive-aggressive tactic. Now I knew she was probably lying in bed, weak, terrified, writing those heartbreaking words in her diary. And I just walked out, without a word, without a glance back. The ocean waves, once a lullaby, now sounded like a mournful dirge. They crashed and receded, taking with them my last vestiges of self-respect. I was a man who had escaped his marriage, only to find himself trapped in a far more terrible prison. The confines of his own unforgivable actions. Sarah was right. I couldn't live without her. 'Cause her absence, compounded by this horrific truth, was a torment worse than any life I could have imagined with her. My paradise was hell. The days that followed were a blur of grief and self-loathing. I stopped trying to maintain the illusion of my new life. The hut fell into disrepair. My efforts to cultivate plants ceased. I barely ate, barely slept. The island, once a stage for my triumphant escape, was now the backdrop for my utter breakdown. I spent hours poring over Sarah's diary, each word a fresh cut. I highlighted passages, reread sentences, searching for any fragment of hope, any justification for my actions. There was none. Only her pain, her love, and her desperate attempts to protect me from her dying. I tried to mourn her, really mourn her for the first time. Not the Sarah I resented, but the Sarah who loved me, who worried about me, who quietly faced her own demise while I plotted my escape. I wept until there were no more tears, until my eyes were dry and burning. The island's beauty, once a source of joy, now felt like a cruel mockery. The vibrant sunsets only highlighted the bleakness of my internal landscape. The warm ocean water, once inviting, felt like a cold, accusing hand. I remembered her small, often overlooked gestures of affection. The way she'd make my coffee exactly how I liked it, even after an argument. The hand-knitted scarf she'd given me one winter, despite my protests that I didn't need one. The thoughtful birthday gifts, always something related to my obscure hobbies. I had dismissed them as obligations, as superficial acts. Now, I saw them for what they were, quiet declarations of love from a woman who was perhaps too afraid or too tired to speak them aloud. The echoes of her voice, which had once driven me to near madness, now came with a different quality. They weren't accusatory or critical. They were soft, sometimes even comforting. "It's okay, Alex. You didn't know." But I did know. Or I should have. The signs were there, masked by my own tunnel vision. I started to gather things from around the island. Smooth stones, fragments of coral, a few particularly beautiful shells. I found a secluded spot near the highest point of the island, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean. It was a place I had once imagined building a triumphant beacon, a symbol of my freedom. Instead, it would be her memorial. I arranged the stones in a small circle, placing the shells and coral fragments inside. It was a crude, humble grave marker for a woman who deserved so much more. I sat before it, the ocean wind whipping my hair, and I talked to her. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice raw, "I am so sorry. I was blind. I was so incredibly blind. You deserved better. You deserved someone who saw you, truly saw you, not some coward who ran away." I confessed everything to the empty air, to the crashing waves. My resentment, my bitterness, my desperate need to escape. And then the crushing realization of what I had truly done. The words flowed, a torrent of confession and regret. "You said I couldn't live without you," I murmured. "And you are right. I am living, yes, but it's a ghost of a life haunted by what I did, by what I lost. This island isn't a paradise, Sarah. It's my penance, my purgatory." I stayed there until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors too vibrant for my broken heart. The memorial was small, easily swallowed by the vastness of the island, but for me, it was everything. It was a physical manifestation of my guilt, a reminder of the irreparable damage I had done. I had proven I could survive physically without her. I could find food, build shelter, endure the elements. But surviving wasn't living. Not truly, not with this crushing weight on my soul. Sarah, even in her absence, even in her death, had proven her words true in the most agonizing way imaginable. I couldn't live without her. Because the life I now had was no life at all. I knew I couldn't stay like this, consumed by grief and self-pity. Sarah, in her diary, had hoped I would find peace. That was the last thing I was feeling. But maybe, just maybe, I could find a different kind of peace. Not the peace of escape, but the peace of acceptance. Acceptance of what I had done, and acceptance of the consequences. I returned to my hut. It was a mess, as was my life. I needed to clean it, to organize it, to find some semblance of order in the chaos. It was a small act, but a necessary one. A tiny step towards living with my guilt, rather than being consumed by it. The island wasn't a paradise, but it was my reality now, and I had to find a way to exist within it. The crushing weight of guilt slowly, agonizingly, began to transform into a dull, persistent ache. It was always there, a constant companion, but it no longer paralyzed me. I still went to Sarah's memorial every day, sometimes just to sit in silence, sometimes to whisper apologies into the wind. I started to pick up the pieces of my life on the island. I repaired the hut, meticulously organized my supplies, and restarted my efforts to cultivate a small garden. Quiet of the island, once so inviting, now held a deeper meaning. It was the sound of my own thoughts, reflections on a life tragically misunderstood. I started to reflect on our entire marriage, seeing past my own bitterness to the complexities of our relationship. It wasn't all bad, I realized. There were moments of genuine connection, of shared laughter, of quiet comfort. Moments I had dismissed or simply forgotten in my rush to escape. I thought about the future, a future without her. It stretched out vast and empty, like the ocean surrounding me. There would be no more arguments, no more silent treatment. But there would also be no more hand-holding, no more shared meals, no more quiet companionship. The emptiness was a constant reminder of what I had thrown away. Not just her life, but the potential of our shared life. One morning while walking along the beach, a strange idea sparked in my mind, a message in a bottle. It was childish, perhaps even foolish, but the urge was overwhelming. I needed to send a message out, not to the world, but to her. A final, desperate apology. I found a clean, sturdy glass bottle, one that had washed ashore and surprisingly remained intact. Inside my hut, I found a few sheets of paper and a pen. My hand trembled as I began to write. My dearest Sarah, if this message ever finds its way to someone, please know that it is a confession, an apology, and a testament to a love I was too blind to see. I wrote for hours, filling page after page. I detailed my journey to the island, my initial misguided sense of triumph. I confessed my resentment, my bitterness, my desperate need to escape. And then I wrote about the diary, about the crushing truth of her illness, her sacrifice, her unconditional love. I know now that your words, "You couldn't live without me," were not a curse, but a desperate plea, a statement of profound love from a woman facing her own end. I was so incredibly wrong, Sarah. I saw only what I wanted to see, heard only what justified my escape. I abandoned you when you needed me most, when you were facing the unimaginable, and for that, I will carry this guilt for the rest of my days. This island, my supposed paradise, is nothing but a monument to my selfishness. I am living, yes, in a physical sense, but my heart, my soul, they died the moment I understood the truth. You were right, Sarah. I cannot truly live without you. Not truly, not happily. My life here is a penance, a slow unfolding of regret. I wish I could go back. I wish I could tell you how sorry I am, how much I appreciate every moment we had, even the difficult ones. I wish I could have held your hand, stood by you, given you the comfort you deserved in your final days. But I cannot. All I can do is live with this crushing weight, this profound loneliness. Forgive me, Sarah. Please forgive me. Even if I can never forgive myself. Forever your flawed, repentant Alex. I reread the letter, tears blurring the ink. It was everything I wanted to say, everything I needed to confess. It wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't erase my guilt. Perhaps in some small, inexplicable way, sending it out into the vast unknown would bring a tiny flicker of peace, a release. I carefully rolled the pages and slipped them into the bottle. I corked it tightly, sealing it with beeswax from an old candle. Then, I walked to the edge of the water, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of melancholy. I held the bottle for a long moment, the weight of it heavy in my hand, heavier still with the weight of my heart. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, I threw it into the ocean. It bobbed for a moment, then caught a current, slowly drifting away, becoming a tiny speck against the vastness of the sea. It was an act of despair, yes, but also an act of acceptance. I was sending my confession, my apology into the abyss. It would likely never be found. But that wasn't the point. The point was the act itself. The acknowledgement, the release. I had proven I could live physically without her, but my heart, my conscience, would never truly escape. Sarah's words, in their tragic prophetic truth, had become the defining mantra of my lonely island existence. Time blurred on the island. The seasons changed, marked by the intensity of the sun, the frequency of storms, the ripeness of the fruit. My beard grew long and white, my hair thin. The harsh sun weathered my skin, etching lines around my eyes that spoke of solitude and sorrow. The initial raw grief and guilt had mellowed into a deep, quiet sadness. It was like a constant hum in the background of my life, always present, never entirely fading. I still visited Sarah's memorial daily, tending to the stones, sometimes bringing a freshly picked flower. It was a ritual, a connection to the woman I had failed so spectacularly. I had learned to live off the island completely, self-sufficient in every way. My hut was sturdy, my garden productive. I moved with an economy of motion, a quiet efficiency born of necessity. I was physically healthier than I had ever been in my life, yet my spirit remained burdened. The phrase, "You couldn't live without me," had taken on a new, profound meaning. I was alive, yes, breathing, eating, existing. But the Alex I once was, the one who shared a life, however flawed, with Sarah, was gone. He had died the day he read her diary. The man on this island was a different person, forged in the fires of regret. I rarely spoke aloud now, except to Sarah at her memorial. My voice, when I did use it, was raspy from disuse. I had no one to talk to, no one to share my thoughts. The animals on the island were my only companions. The exotic birds that nested in the palms, the schools of fish in the lagoon, the occasional sea turtle that hauled itself onto the sand. Sometimes a strange sense of peace would settle over me. It wasn't happiness, not by a long shot. It was more like a quiet acceptance of my fate. This was my life now. This island was my purgatory, my sanctuary, my chosen exile. I had run from one life, only to find myself inextricably bound to another, one shaped by the very person I thought I'd escape. I often wondered about the bottle floating somewhere in the vast ocean. Had it sunk, washed ashore on some distant land? Had a fisherman found it? The thought was a fleeting one. It didn't matter anymore if anyone read it. The act of writing it, of sending it, had been for me a desperate plea for forgiveness from myself. The memories of Sarah, once haunting, now held a bittersweet quality. I remembered her quirks, her passions, her frustrations. I remembered the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way she hummed when she cooked. I saw her not as a villain, but as a complex, vulnerable human being who had faced immense suffering, largely alone, and I carried the weight of my failure to see that. I had proven her wrong in the most literal sense. I was still breathing, my heart still beat, I was living. But the richness, the joy, the human connection that truly defines life, that was gone. I was an island within an island, isolated by my own choices, haunted by the ghost of a love I had so carelessly discarded. Sarah's prophecy had come true in a way neither of us could have foreseen. I was living, but only just. Many years passed. My hair was fully white now, my movements slower, my body creaking with the weight of time and solitude. The island had become my entire world, its rhythms ingrained in my very being. The hut was a permanent structure, strong and weathered. The garden flourished. I was an old man, alone in my self-imposed exile. One afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues I had come to know so intimately, I was sitting by the shore watching the waves. The familiar sound, a constant companion for decades, was a comfort now. It was the only sound that truly belonged to me. Then in the far distance a faint speck appeared on the horizon. My eyes, though dimming with age, focused intently. It grew larger, slowly, steadily. A boat, a real boat. Not a hallucination, not a ghost. It was a fishing trawler, its engine a low thrum that carried across the water. My heart quickened, a forgotten sensation. For a moment, a wild, desperate thought flared. Rescue. A return to the world I had abandoned. Chance to confess, to seek some form of absolution, even if it was decades too late. But then, as the boat drew closer, its outline becoming clearer, the thought faded. What would I return to? A world where Sarah was long gone. A world where I was a phantom, a man who had vanished without a trace, only to reappear as a wizened old hermit. There was nothing left for me there. No one. The boat passed by, a mere speck on the vast canvas of the ocean. It didn't spot me. Or perhaps it did, and simply saw an old man on a remote beach, not worth bothering. I didn't signal them. I didn't wave. I just watched it go, a silent observer of a life I had once been part of. A life I had willingly, albeit ignorantly, cast aside. As the boat disappeared from view, the silence returned, settling over me like a familiar blanket. I was an island within an island, and that was my fate, my new life on a private island. It was exactly what I had wanted, in the most twisted, heartbreaking way possible. I looked out at the endless expanse of the ocean, the setting sun painting a path of gold across the water. I saw Sarah's face in the shimmering light, not the resentful one from my memories, but the one from her diary. Sad, loving, accepting. A single tear, dry and rough from years of sun and unshed grief, finally traced a path down my weathered cheek. She had been right all along, just not in the way I'd understood. I had proven I could physically survive. But true living, the kind that filled the soul, the kind that made life worth living, required connection, love, and a conscience free from crushing regret. I had tried to escape her, to escape our life, to prove I didn't need her. But her memory, her love, and the unbearable weight of my betrayal, they lived with me every single day. And in that ultimate profound loneliness, I finally understood. Sarah was right. I couldn't live without her. Not truly, not ever. And on my private island, surrounded by the vast, indifferent ocean, that was the most heartbreaking truth of all.